just a couple of brief takeaways for our panel today. Cindy, we started with you first. Perhaps you want to give us a few of your final thoughts from today?
So I'd say some key takeaways are Canada knows that it's essentially leading the way. It knows that all of the world's eyes are on Canada as it seeks to navigate the regulatory framework around recreational cannabis. So I think it's not surprising that you could say as a whole, Canada's stance on the legalization of recreational cannabis as a whole has been viewed as very conservative. You have these restrictive limits on the amounts that any one person can possess and grow. You've got a heavily regulated retail market sector. It differs from province to province, but for the most part, they're heavily regulated. There's significant government oversight in every aspect, starting from production and distribution, and there's the advertising and the promotion rules that I went over earlier. They've been criticized for being very anti-competition, and if businesses aren't allowed to properly promote their products, that stifles competition and further research and development, arguably. And the recent release of the regulations on edibles and extracts that I also touched on also have been criticized for being very, very conservative. To limit one individual package to 10 milligrams of THC alone has been viewed as very, very limiting. So I think there's a lot of unknowns that remain, and even with the rules that we have in place, not all of them are clear. So I think you're going to see lots of companies in Canada try and push the limits to see how far they can get.
Thank you so much, John. We then went to you. Perhaps you want to give us a few of your key takeaways today.
Sure. I think this is always a really fascinating discussion to do a kind of a comparative look at what three very different kind of regions are doing with respect to marijuana and medical marijuana regulation and legalization. And, as Justice O'Connor once eloquently stated that the states are the laboratories of democracy. So I think there's a lot to be learned through the different approaches that each state is taking. I've got a lot of bias towards Michigan with how nice things have been from a lot of perspectives comparatively in having extremely permissive marijuana regulations with respect to not just the quantities that are permitted, but I didn't get a chance to touch on this earlier, and I'm glad Cindy just brought it up with regards to the potency as well. Michigan has no issue with edibles, and our restrictions on packaging are, as opposed to a 5 milligram dose, the maximum amount of THC allowed in one dose for an edible is actually 50 milligrams, and a single package can contain up to 200 milligrams of THC. So it's always very interesting to see what other states are doing, and for those listeners who live in states that haven't yet enacted comprehensive adult use or medical reform, it's important to take a look at all the different menu options out there and pick and choose what you think's best as far as putting together your platform for advocating for change.
Thank you so much. Carl, we heard from you finally. Perhaps you want to close us out with a few of your key takeaways.
I just want to add one point with respect to CBD. In addition, we should recognize that some states regulate CBD more heavily than others, right? CBD topicals and whatnot in Ohio can only be marketed through licensed retail establishments that sell medical marijuana. On the other hand, in New York City and New York State, you can get topicals and orals in high-end head shops. So that impacts the degree to which there's risk of FDA intervention. So in terms of closing remarks, I would say this. Obviously, Canada is well ahead of the United States, having legalized federally. I think that this is a rapidly evolving area, and I hope that came across from my presentation, literally changing on a daily, if not hourly basis. If you're going to be in this area, you need to use applications, use web notifications, whatever is convenient for you to stay up to the minute on the rules and regulations. And also, if you're in a state that is still seeking to put a program, either a medical program or a recreational program in place, get involved. Get out there, find a trade group, find a lobbying organization, and get involved and force the issue. Just don't lie back and let someone do it for you. It's going to be a huge industry. It's going to be hugely profitable. There's going to be a great return on investment for the time that you put into it. And for that reason, it's very rewarding.